Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 10 of Asura's Bride. Today we have Patty, Peg, and Darla. Say hi, guys.
Hi.
Hi. And this episode doesn't have a title, but we can make one up. Maybe at the end. You can see what title it belongs to. So the last episode ended, and I have like a question for you guys right away because there's a bit of a continuity question that I have. So the last episode ended where Ulaan had just rushed in, and then his soldier had come in and said that Yujen had been found. She'd been married to the prince of Qianli, the dynasty, blah, 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 all that stuff. And then we open up this episode with Yuwa and Ulaan talking, but Ulaan is, they don't really address what just happened, and Ulaan is suddenly dressed. Did you guys notice that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, fine. I wasn't going hallucinating. I went back and forth twice to double check. Okay, fine. But as far as I remember, there was a big break between these two episodes, right? Which would make sense that you come back to a couple months later and you forget that.
Yeah, so I know, like, I read through a few of the episodes before I came on board and started taking notes for this one. And we go from them being, you know, like, they're basically naked and really vulnerable, and somebody bursts in and says, you know, there's an attack that's going to happen, and that Princess Yujen has, you know, this is after Yuwa admits who she actually is and reveals her identity. And this dude bursts in and he's like, hey, you know, this is something that we have to deal with right now. The battle's happening. We need you to go now. And so this kind of puts pressure on them. And so I think that's why when we come back, they're fully dressed because he's getting ready to go off into battle.
I guess that does make sense.
Mm-hmm.
So we start off with, oh, I totally forgot. Do you guys want to split this episode into 4?
Oh, you mean like who's explaining and we can. I usually just jump in organically as things pop up, but I want to make sure that I'm making room for Peg and Darlene too, because I tend to talk a lot.
I'm happy interrupting or doing it however you want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I don't care. It doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, I mean, y'all three, I don't have to worry about you all not talking. So, okay, so he's sitting now and his head is in his hands, and he tells Yuwa, he says, Yuwa, when I was with you, and there's this backdrop of snow, it's kind of like reminiscent of the battlefield. We're kind of in his head, and you hear his soldiers. This is actually, it looks like it's actually now, sorry, it's not, he is reminiscing, but the scene that we see is what's happening outside the tent. So you see snow is falling and there's a fire and the soldiers are getting ready. You hear them like kind of blurt out, I'm gonna skin those effing Eastern scum alive if it's the last thing I do. We'll be riding through the snowstorm, prepare your troops, this will be a fierce battle. So they're about to head out. And Ulaan is sitting on the trunk in the tent. His head is in his hands. And he says, you know, when I've been with you, I've laughed more than I deserve to. And Yuwa asks him more than you deserve to. Yeah.
So when I was going through this episode, I was like, this episode is like a masterclass in Lily's storytelling style and the visuals in it. So I just wanted to point out a couple things in the very first panel here. So, you know, a lot of times when you do a story or a visual story or comic or whatever, people think you have characters, you have setting, right? And the setting is some sort of passive thing, like I'm in an office or I'm on the street or I'm in a car, or whatever. But the setting in this comic is active. It's almost like another character as you go through. And there's like 2 characters in this particular episode, which is snow and fire. And so they come together twice in the visually, and this is the very first one at the beginning here. You have the snow and you have the fire, and as you go through the episode, you can see that they represent different things, but here they are together.
Yeah, the fire continues right, like from the outside into the tent, right, where the fire outside is like a symbol of the war and the passion and the anger and the violence that's about to happen, and then the fire inside is, you know, the kind of like the internal passion between them and the warmth and the comfort of home.
And I actually disagree with you. I think it's very consistent. If you look, when we go through, I think that the snow is sort of representative and the ice of war and death and so your duty and treachery and having to have your defenses up, whereas the fire is wherever it shows up, passion. Well, in the first panel, definitely anger. You see how angry they are, and their hair is kind of whipping around there. But yeah, and then like you said, connection and passion, loyalty. It would be loyalty in both places. But in that second panel, I just want to point out again here, I am talking too much, but how
I was talking too much.
Lily uses the visuals to represent the internal emotional state, their landscape of the characters. So in this, even in the second panel where you're like, oh, he's sitting, he's got his face in his hands, but you've got the fire there. The fire is contained in those two, whatever they are, urns. And later on, the fire won't be contained in those urns. So it's kind of important that they are. And if you look at both their characters' hair, this is one of the only panels where their hair is limp. Their hair is not whipping around. It's not creating this motion. And it's representing that heaviness of the feelings between the two of them in this moment. So they're both their hair is just drooped, which is unusual.
Yeah, I agree with you, Peg. I think there's like a huge elephant in the room here. And it's, you know, as I was going through the previous episodes, there's huge bits about identity and truth and loyalty. And, you know, these are all things that are weighing heavy in that space. And so I love the way that you've pointed out that, you know, this fire kind of represents the turmoil and, you know, the war around them, and then also the war within.
It's all visual. And then there's nature on her robe, because a lot of the visual, there's a lot of traditional art in this episode that invokes like Chinese paintings, and there on her robe, you see that style with the branches, which almost look like a fracture in there, but the bare branches and the ink wash and the leaves at the top.
Yeah. And like part of what really got me here, and this is something that I really paid attention to, because throughout the entire time that we've been reading this and going through this story, you know, the first things that Ulaan says is that I've laughed more than I deserve to, and I've failed my troops. And it, you know, this is a huge issue, I think, with anyone who goes to war. And we still see this a lot even today, is this feeling of survivor's guilt, of I didn't do enough, I wasn't enough. And it ties to that sense of loyalty that he feels to his people, and I think this really tags onto like what he struggles with later on, and I'll bring it up again. But like even when he's saying this, he can't even look at Yuwa while he's saying this. He's just so distraught.
Yeah. Which is, you know, first of all, nice that he's talking to her and revealing his inner emotions, because I imagine he doesn't do that with a lot of people.
Right. Wonder where Cora gets it from.
One thing I'm going to add to this, because when I think of fire, I think of warmth and comfort and safety. And I feel like in that environment, he felt safe enough to say his inner feelings to Yuwa. So that's what the fire means to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he really goes in depth in these next panels. But Peg, it looks like you wanted to say something more. I don't want to interrupt.
Oh no, I'm good. I'm just happily listening.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure, because we go into my absolute favorite panel. Like I even have it in my notes. Favorite panel.
Like you need a reminder of what your favorite panel is.
Right. Jesus.
Before we go into that, I just want to point out how attentive Yuwa is, and how she went from standing up next to him to leaning down and crouching near him and just looking at him with a very compassionate, sensitive, concerned look in her eyes, which we love.
Yeah. Oh, love her so much. And like, I think he can sense that. Like, he's not looking at her, but he can sense it, because he goes into excruciating detail about what he had to go through. And again, this isn't something that people who go to war talk about, you know, just flippantly, especially with people that they've only known for a handful of days. So he has an incredible amount of trust in her. And he says, in the battle I was returning from, I was the last one standing. We were all betrayed by a trusted commander. Still wondering to this day who that motherfucker is. Excuse my French. And it says, after all my troops were gone, I raged on for days. My anger and pain carried me through. And then we get this incredible panel of Ulaan. It was clearly in the middle of battle, and he's holding a severed head. And he's in that forest, in that mist, like we talked about in episode 3, Peg. But I get this sense, like when I look at this panel, that he feels incredibly trapped. Like, sure, he probably laid waste to those guys, don't get me wrong. But like when I see this, like he's encircled by blood, his hands are covered in blood, it's everywhere. And I feel like I get the sense that he feels trapped. Nothing is going to take his pain away, no matter how hard he tries.
I point out a couple of visual elements too.
Sure, please.
Those birds above his head that are in between those bubbles where he's talking about the troops he lost, to me, they're kind of a visual representation of the spirits of those soldiers that are flying away from him. They can never get. Plus, it's kind of got that 𝗙𝗵𝗂. I'll defer to Darla, but that 𝗙𝗵𝗂 kind of look to the whole panel is very evokes those styles. Especially look at the his hair, his lashing hair, which again, there's that inner turmoil. It's not hanging straight anymore, and that's more than just the wind. That's, you know, but it's, see how it's kind of see-through like smoke, but that's that. To me, it calls up that that traditional ink painting.
Whenever I see his hair in the air like that, I think of him being like wild. And in this panel, it's very barbaric and wild, and it's sexy.
Well,
the other thing is, look at his tunic. It's basically a metaphor for this blood that's actually like flowing behind him, leaving a trail of grief. You know, it's even the colors even flowing out of the cloth there.
Yeah, and we don't see his face. And I think that that's hugely important, that we don't see his face.
You see the face of the severed.
He's ashamed.
Yeah,
like his downward glance, everything.
Yeah.
Oh God.
I think,
you know, and
makes, you know what he says next, like what you said, no matter how many people I killed, I just couldn't bring the dead back. That does show, and you were saying the shame, right? He might even be feeling ashamed while he's killing all those people, because he knows that probably it's fruitless, and it's just an expression of his anger rather than maybe even being necessary.
Go ahead.
This panel, the feeling I get, that atmospheric, that evocative forest, the snow, it's mystical, it's almost like a dream landscape. That's an example for me of where the setting is like an active character. Like, he's not alone to me in that one. He's there in that place, and that place and him are in this, there's a dualism rather than just being by himself.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting that you say that, Peg, about him not being alone. And we'll talk a little bit about this later when we talk about the 𝗪𝗀𝗋. Sorry if I'm butchering it. But he really isn't alone. And we find that out. But I agree with you, the setting, like there is that mystical kind of magical feel to it, that kind of heavy presence in that panel. And just, that one gets me every time. Like, not gonna lie, that was my lock screen on my phone for like months. I love it so much.
you are listening to this, we have a shot just of her eyes, just listening, being compassionate, open, wide, really being attentive to him. And then she puts her hand on the side of his neck and she says, "Did getting this tattoo hurt?" And Ulaan answers
Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Count that. That's touch number 1. Just
Mhm.
put a pin in that one.
Okay. And she asked, "Then why did you do it?" And he looks down for a second. You can kind of see he's thinking about it. It seems like it's a personal question. It's something that means something to him. And he says, "It's just pause, a reminder." And then we have a image, which actually, Peg, I think I'll leave this to you because you're great at describing images and what they represent.
Yeah.
Thanks. And okay, Darla, that tattoo is a peony, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
So in the first one, or earlier episodes, when he gets to his camp, the peony is on his flag, right? It's on his banner.
Mhm.
Right. So she's talking about that tattoo, and the next thing you see is you're out in the war zone. You don't see soldiers, you just see spattered blood. There's a very ghostly outline of a forest in the background. You can see a tree, but between the blood and the trees are these tattered banners. And you don't see a peony on the banners, but she just touched the symbol on his flag, and now you see all these flags waving in the wind, kind of torn to shreds. And it just evokes the suffering of his country as represented on his neck, what they've gone through with the blood sprayed all over.
And I kind of want to point out, and this is more from a psychological standpoint, but I also think, one, you've got to think like that's got to be heavy information for someone like Yuwa to take in. That's a lot. And I think it's important that she doesn't shy away from it. She leans in. And like you said, Peg, we get the first touch. And I think not only is she trying to make a point here about the tattoo and the pain, and I'll get to that in a minute, but she's also trying to bring him out of his memory. And if you think about it, when someone has PTSD, one of the things that you try to do, or at least I try to do when I notice one of my clients is flooding, is bring them up out of it, to like bring them back to reality. And it's things like saying their name, or asking them an off-putting question like this, like the tattoo, did it hurt? So I think it serves a dual purpose here. And it kind of jars him out of it, like he actually faces her now to answer the question.
Yeah, I was counting that double touch to his face as the second touch.
Yeah.
But the first one was just on the neck.
But
yeah, I really appreciate all that. And then you've got the fires behind there when the camera pulls back.
Right.
Yeah.
That
So
warmth.
right, and then he tells you what directly, what it represents. He says it's a reminder of those who sacrificed their lives in battle for our kingdom. And then then we see touch number 2, which is Yuwa leaning out her hands, and his hair is still dripping. It looks like that's water dripping from his hair. And his face is down. He looks extremely depressed.
He's just so sad.
Right?
That look kills me.
And she reaches both her hands out to touch his chin, and he's just looking extremely morose and vulnerable. Like he's not hiding his pain from her. He's not looking away. He's not looking down. His head is on his hands. He's allowing himself to be completely open and sad around her, which a lot of people have a very hard time being sad around other people. You're always like, "Oh, how you doing?" "Fine, fine. It's okay. It's okay." Like we brush aside our pain. And very few people to whom we allow, and very few moments, even with the people we do trust, that we allow ourselves to show that we're sad or upset.
Yeah. And there's this huge piece, and this is the part I was going to get to, because she talks about his tattoo hurting and what it represented, and then also the emotional pain that he's going through. So she's trying to get him to see the parallel between his physical pain of that tattoo, and then the emotional pain of what it represents, and then the emotional pain that he's dealing with right here. And what I think, and this is just my guess, is that she's trying to point out to him, as she's saying, don't do this, don't kill, this is a chosen pain, and you know, can we back away? Can we step away from it? And he may not be able to. From his perspective, he may not see it as chosen pain. He sees it as duty. He sees it as, this is what I owe my people. And I think that's why he has the reaction that he does in the next panels, is because he feels an incredible sense of duty. And she's just saying like, hey, it doesn't have to be this way, kind of like their own version of the third outcome.
There is a little bit of naivete in her words, in my opinion, because I think she doesn't have the experience. And obviously, like, there's always room for idealism, and we should always, personally, I think, like, right, we should always strive for the most ideal path if we can. But I understand why he would be so offended, because he's like, you haven't been in my shoes. What do you know? Like, how do you haven't had to make the choices I've had to make. I can completely understand why he would get very ticked off, you know, where he feels like he's been doing the right thing and struggling with doing the right thing all along. And then she's like, oh, you know, maybe what you've been doing all along is the wrong thing. And like, that must be very wounding.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, but I would also argue that as a princess, and what we find out a little bit about her later on, is that she's a little more versed in war than we think. So I think that also has to be taken into account. And they're both very clearly wrapped up in their emotions right now. This is really intense, and not everybody's going to think, like, they're not going to think very clearly in that moment. I don't think. They're overtaken by emotion. And so she's just pleading with him, like, it doesn't have to be this way. And I get that from some perspective that could be naive. But I think she's really trying to reach that part of him that doesn't want to kill, that doesn't want to do this anymore. And hence the misunderstanding.
Right. And what happens with him, it triggers a very strong theme for him, where he remembers his father telling him, Ulaan, my son, you are the kindest. And suddenly you see his eyebrows change. They're not like soft and open anymore. Suddenly he's ticked off. And he remembers, and that kindness will be your downfall if you let it take over. So do not falter, do not stumble, and do not weep, or the 𝗪𝗂𝗪 will devour you in an instant. And you see the flashback again of that scene with the demonic dogs and the father on the battlefield. So not a good memory.
No. Honestly, and this is where I was like, okay, I need to dive back into, because I had read up on the 𝗪𝗂𝗪 before. I was like, I need to refresh my memory and look at this. That kindness will be your downfall if you let it take over. So do not falter, do not stumble, and do not weep. So when I looked up this legend, it's a nocturnal yokai is what an 𝗪𝗪𝗪 is. And they typically eat humans, and they're typically in like along forested roads, or like in dark, deep mountain areas, which is pretty much where they are. And so when I think about that, back to Yuwa's journey and like how they met and everything, and how she stumbled on a rock. So one of the big things with this is that they're described as being like a double-edged sword. So they're a protector, and at the same time, they thirst for humans. And so if you stumble, if you keep your footing and you're able to walk, they're actually a protection. So they'll keep other predators away, other yokai away. But if you stumble, or if you fall and lose your footing, as is common in those mountainous areas, they'll actually eat you. So, and I thought about back to the night that wolf attacked Yuwa. She had tripped just before that. And so I was like, oh, damn. And so when I think about this panel and what he's thinking, you know, he's going back to the moment that his father died, the moment where his father stumbled. I don't know what happened. I would love to know what happened, in another unanswered question. But, you know, what does he think that this is his moment of stumbling?
Sure, I think so. I mean, from what he says next, he thinks this whole thing is like a trap, because that this moment of kindness, that, you know, he's tempted to be kind, and that will be his downfall, and that she's the temptress. And that's exactly what he says. He grabs her hand, And he says, is that what this is all about? Let me ask you, Princess Yuwa. And, he grabs her, he gets up, he's looking very aggressive, his eyes are glowing. And he says, what else were you schooled in? Assassination, seduction? Were you sent here to take my life? Or were you sent to distract me while the real Princess Eugen formed the alliance to launch an attack on my city? And he grabs her and he's grabbed her by the chin. I mean, he's quite upset. Oh boy.
Yeah.
I mean, would be a big betrayal, especially coming on the heels of that betrayal by the commander. I can see why he's more sensitive to betrayal than perhaps he would have been without that. So he, everything that he thought was her being a good person or enjoying him and appreciating him, he's now suspecting maybe this was all a ploy.
Right.
So in the use of the backgrounds, which I'm obsessed with in this episode, there are 3 panels where the background disappears and there's no background. And that's at moments of extreme emotional intensity, but for Yuwa, for Ulaan, and for both of them. So this is the first one when he grabs her, which is also the 3rd touch. And it's his, his burst of anger there. And so everything drops away, but that technique of doing that, it's almost like it hits us so hard visually that we have this emotional response, because suddenly it like dropping out the background ratchets up the intensity, especially along with, because in the previous panels their hair was still down and serene, and now look, both their hair is whipping all over because of the emotions of this moment. It represents their inner, her shock and response and his temper, and so it's just the emotions are carried through the visuals so perfectly. It's magical.
Yeah. It's definitely intense. And I'm not gonna lie, the first time I read this, I was like, damn, Ulaan, calm the fuck down. but I get this, and it helped me again to read the previous episodes, because we have to think about this in the backdrop of his sense of guilt. He went into this knowing who she was, or at least knowing that she was the enemy, right? So yes, he thought she was Eugen, but that's still a princess of Shan. He enjoyed her company as the enemy, and so he's in my mind, he's operating off of this intense guilt of, I just came back from this battle, I lost a ton of my men, I've been canoodling with the enemy, and I've been enjoying myself, and how dare I enjoy myself? And now I'm starting to think that this was all a ploy, that I've been used. And so to me, after reading through all of that and coupling with all of that, then his anger makes sense.
And his eyes ignited too when he was angry.
Which made me think, is this Ulaan, or is it the Okori Inu? His battle side, because remember, he told Yuwa, that person out on the battlefield, that is not me. That is not me. And so I'm wondering if this is that moment, I wonder how much influence the Okori Inu had over this moment where he had that flare of anger of, you need to protect yourself. This is the moment, because I think it's important that we actually see them, that they're these mystified demons in his mind, they made themselves known. So I'm wondering, are they present in this room right now? Are they influencing how he's talking and saying? What do you've got something on your mind, Darlene?
I think he's obviously, they're gonna come out to say something through his anger, or his, what's the word for this, okay, so anyways, he's just really out of control with his emotions and feelings right now. And the Okori Inu is obviously coming out and influencing him into thinking and questioning every motive this pretty girl is doing. Is this a ploy? Is she just some thought I can fuck? Or what's her motive behind all of this? So he's okay, like you said earlier, like the 𝗏𝗏 is gonna devour him every time he stumbles and there's signs of weakness. So this is his way of making sure that he's not stumbling.
I think that
Okay.
I think the theory of the 𝗏𝗏 influencing him is definitely has legitimacy. But one thing I really like about stories in general is I like to see people making mistakes and not making the best decisions, because we all get angry and we all get moody, or say things we shouldn't say, or whatever it is in a particular situation. But it's okay. It's not okay, but it's part of being human. And we make mistakes, and then hopefully we regret it and apologize later. But even if this is just Ulaan, it's understandable, and he's a human being.
Yeah, and it could be just a representation of his internal demons, because he's got a lot. So I think the 𝗏𝗏 take that representation, they manifest it in my mind. And even you see on the next panel where he's asking her, like, what else were you schooled in? Assassination, seduction? Were you here to take my life, or were you sent to distract me while the real Princess Yujin formed the alliance to launch an attack on my city? Look at his eyes in that panel. Like when he's grabbing her, like you can see the flares, like the red flares, and I'm like, oh boy.
He mad.
Yeah.
And Yuwa, her defense, doesn't crumple up in the corner and start crying.
No.
She gets mad at him too, and she says, I was not. She yells at him, and she says, and there was no such ploy. Even while he's manhandling her, she is angry at him. And Ulaan's like, no such ploy? Then tell me, how the hell did you meet with bandits who would never have appeared in those unused parts of the woods? And then we have a map, which basically shows that the straight direction, like from her kingdom to the 𝗙𝗏𝗄 kingdom, was straight, and they made a detour to the forest in the west where they saw the bandits. So, and he asked her, he's like, why did you make a huge detour to 𝗙𝗏𝗄 and intersect with the route I was taking back to camp?
Yeah, and then it's sketchy as hell.
Yeah, that's odd as fuck.
Yeah, like, why would you do that? You'd have no reason. So I totally get why he's like, his paranoia has definitely ratcheted up, but it's one of those times where like your paranoia gets validated by facts. And it's unfortunate because we know it's not the truth. We know that she didn't know anything about this ploy, but I mean, from his outsider's perspective, this looks really fishy.
And we're about to find out why that happened. He says, I could have brushed the coincidences aside, but not anymore. Now she's doing this. And now we get a flashback to the Shan kingdom.
I'm such a sucker for maps. I love maps. It just makes me happy to see a map. Like, thumbs up to the map.
Yes. Every good fantasy story, which I consider this a little bit of a fantasy story, has a damn map. I love it.
Tiny trees. Tiny trees. I just love tiny trees. That's so cool.
I'm very much not a spatially oriented person. Like, I get lost all the time, and I'm very bad at direction. So maps are very, I kind of like scan them and like brush them aside. But I know many people do enjoy maps.
Yeah. Well, and I think it also, like, not to dive 10 levels too into this, but if you look at the position of the Shan kingdom, where Ulaan's forces are versus the eastern region of the 𝗙𝗏𝗄, like, they're very isolated. They're surrounded by Ulaan's troops, and obviously we're seeing very visually that their only hope, sorry Obi-Wan, is the 𝗙𝗏𝗄 region. Sorry, I'm getting weird. But like,
no,
you can
keep
tell.
going. I'm just loving the little tiny houses. You
Tiny
do.
houses.
Yes, political science.
The nerd is showing. But no, like, they're very isolated and yet surrounded by Ulaan's troops. So of course they're like freaking out and wanting to come up with backwards ways to solve their military issue. They need more humans. And like, those tiny houses, Peg, those are humans. So they need more troops.
But a kingdom is a tiny house on the top of a slightly bigger house. Boom. That's what that is.
I got it. Took me a while.
Oh man.
Maps. Gotta love the maps.
Yeah, everybody at home's like, Jesus, it's just a map. Like, no, it's not.
Wait, guys, those little triangles, those are mountains. Sorry. Just in case.
Oh my gosh.
I'm not gonna go back to first grade. Anyway. Where's
So
the
now we get
compass?
some backstory.
Yeah, so we're back at the Shan Kingdom, and the colors, I feel like I'm Peg here, but the colors completely change. We suddenly have a blue sky, and we learn things that we did not know, because we hear, oh, so Eugen's disappearance was faked, and you'd already sent her to the Qianli Kingdom days ago, and we have two shadowy figures. We don't see who they are yet, and the other guy says bound and gagged and completely unwilling, but yes. As predicted, with the unknowing help of Princess Yuwa, we've delayed the return of King Asura, so we had time to prepare for the attack and launch it successfully. And the bandits were tipped off by you? Yes. And there we have the answer.
Yep. This just makes me feel like poor Yuwa. She's got some sketchy ass family. Like, I know they're between a rock and a hard place, but like, and we talk about this in the conversation going, that, you know, both of them are like, why would you put her in such a dangerous situation? Well, you put her in this dangerous situation too, you know, it wasn't just me.
I actually think by the time we finish all these panels, I had a positive view, but let's finish all these panels and then let's discuss it together, I guess. Cool. So turns out these two people, we see one of them is the king of the Shan Kingdom, and he says, you've been Yuwa's mentor since she was a child. How could you send her on such a dangerous mission? And the other guy was the grand advisor of the Shan Kingdom, who we saw before. And he says, I could say the same for you, sending her off as a replacement without a second thought, just because she isn't your flesh and blood daughter. Anyway, and this is, you know, showing his trail of line of thought. He says the Northern Kingdom has rejected every peace offering from us. So deeply seated is their hatred and distrust of this region. But King Asura is not without weakness. Send a maiden such as the fourth princess his way when his guard is completely down. And we have, you know, a picture of their first time seeing each other. As a young hot-blooded male who spent years on the battlefield surrounded by hardened men, blood and death, he will never be able to resist. And the king asked, in that case, why not Eugen? He said, no offense, but beautiful women like Princess Eugen are a dime a dozen in his court. Legendary beauties from far and wide are presented to him yearly. All have been sent back untouched to his neglected harem or back home. It isn't beauty that will captivate him, but something much more than that. And I've trained Yuwa her whole life to be ready for such a moment. And then this is crucial to me, I think. He said, the king says, you're obsessed with destroying King Asura even more so than I am. Aren't you a northerner yourself? And the advisor says, I've done nothing but good for this kingdom, have I not? Yes, that's why I trust you. Good, because I've told you a long time ago, Your Majesty, I'm here to repay a debt. So I actually thought, maybe I'm reading this wrong. I actually thought at the end of all this that he sent her as a way of making peace. I'm not sure if I'm interpreting it correctly or not, because he says, you know, we tried to make peace with them and they resisted, but I could see where it's like, okay, so it's violent. It is going to be, he says here, okay, this is how we could have more time for our attack. But I kind of thought maybe he was hoping that there would be peace between them, with her and them two marrying each other.
I mean, that might be. I think it's interesting, like, how far back does his plan go? And what was the Grand Advisor's real meaning here? Like, what was he trying to accomplish? Is he trying to accomplish peace? Is he trying to take out the Northern Kingdom? What do you think, Darlene?
Okay, I just want to say, I'm like, does the Grand Advisor have the 𝗪𝗖 following him too? Because his eyes be glowing, and he's obviously angry and holds a grudge for many years. And for me, I think he's sending Yuwa as a way to get Ulaan's guard down. So he, you know, gets in a relationship, has sex and whatever, and then boom, and goes Yuwa's, you know, what region, attacking his region, and then taking over.
Yeah.
That's, I'm a little conflicted because I feel like he seems to be saying both. And then I don't get why his eyes are glowing red and what debt is he here to repay? What I'm still not sure by that.
Well, and I don't think we ever find out the answer.
This is like to me, this is like the
So this is why I really.
cliffhanger. Oops. Am I frozen? Okay.
Patty's all frozen.
Oh, poor
I know.
Patty. Anyways,
Oh.
God, I don't even know where to start. I have
Okay.
a lot of
You were frozen,
thoughts.
Patty, you were frozen a little bit, but I think, I
Yeah.
think you're good now.
Okay.
So Peg, you were saying?
Oh, well, I mean, every story needs an awesome bad guy. Who's the bad guy in this one? Obviously, it's not Ulaan, even though he's the invading king. So isn't this your bad guy? In which case he would
Yeah,
be
he's
set
like
on
the
revenge.
Clyde.
Yeah, like revenge against Ulaan.
So what's
And
the debt?
I have a question from the fandom for you, Patty.
Oh God.
Since
What the heck?
you have researched the 𝗪𝗏 and I know you have like 10,000 theories. The question is, so if this guy has the 𝗪𝗏 in him, or it's under the curse or what have you, is the 𝗪𝗏 hereditary in that the dad was talking to Ulaan about it? Does that mean that the Grand Advisor might be related to Ulaan, a
But,
relative?
I was like, is he a
Is that a
brother?
question? So what do you think, Patty?
Whoa.
I think he is related.
Or
I don't
anyway?
know if they're brothers. I
They're
think
not,
they are
'cause he's
related
not
because it seems like
hot.
it was passed down. Well,
Hey,
let me
now.
just say, like, I believe, if I remember correctly, and if I read it correctly, I believe that Ulaan's father had the 𝗪𝗏, which is why in those earlier episodes when Ulaan is younger, he does not have the red eyes, I don't think. And so he is the one that's chosen. He's also not the oldest son either. So while it's hereditary, the 𝗪𝗏 chooses whoever they think is going to be the strongest, which makes me wonder, he may not be a brother, he may be a cousin. And if I'm going down the, what does this mean for later on in the story, I think of Torah and Goliath, because we have two people with this, that are potentially related, that have the same color eyes. And what does that mean? Because we still don't know what Torah's eye color means. So, I mean, that's just kind of where my brain goes with it. But yes, I do think that the Grand Advisor is related to Ulaan.
Thank you.
Sorry. I just took a really long trip around that answer.
No, that's great. Analysis, we live for your analysis. But there's so much going on in these panels. Like, I really like the character design of the the King of Shan. I don't know, I just like his face and how he's sculpted there. And I wonder, I was really surprised when I read their interaction, because I thought, this is the king of the kingdom, why isn't he cutting this guy's head off? Because he lied to him, he deceived him. Like, the king didn't know that this was that Eugen was actually kidnapped, right? And then he, even though the king previously said, yeah, it'd be fine to tie her up, he took it upon himself to like bind a princess and haul her off to get married, and then took it upon himself because the king is also surprised by the bandit attack. So I was like, wow, that's, and then he says, well, I trust you to use my daughters as pawns, or trust you with both my daughters' lives. But that's a lot for a king not to know about in his own kingdom, involving his own kids and their marriages and bandit attacks. And I was like, wow, either this advisor really has something on this guy, or
right.
It's just a really interesting relationship. I mean, but another thing that it could be was pointed out to me when I brought that question up before, but maybe it's a plot device so that the king isn't doing all these sort of scheming, manipulative things, so that he can still be a good-hearted character and not be, so that the bad guy can do the bad guy stuff.
Right.
So
and I still wonder, is the Grand Advisor actually a bad guy? And again, we don't ever really find out.
No.
And But there's the other piece to this that really struck me was that he's been training Yuwa since childhood. So how long has he been in the kingdom?
Yeah, seems like he doesn't look old. He looks
Right.
rather
He
young.
doesn't
His
look
skin
old.
is
Like
very
maybe
smooth.
they
Yeah.
grew up as brother and sister kind of thing. I don't know. Because I think Yuwa, I mean, she strikes me as around Poppy's age, maybe early 20s.
I think he's older than Yuwa.
Mm-hmm.
But he also has intimate knowledge of, because the king, Ulaan is this, the king of the north is this, sorry, Game of Thrones, is this mysterious figure that's terrifying and like this mythological force that's going to come and sweep through us. But he knows his weaknesses, how he'd be tempted, what kind of girl he likes, whether his harem's neglected or not. He has all this very personal information.
Right.
So, he says, well, you're a northerner, but not just any old northerner. He really knows. So that kind of would lean towards the relative or some sort of family member or close to the court anyways. Because he knows things that some of his soldiers wouldn't know,
Yeah, he's probably still in contact with people in the north. This is a lot of his current information.
Yeah.
Gotta watch out for those advisors, right?
So the part where he says that King Asura does not, use his harem and he neglects them. I think that's kind of like a throwaway to us as readers to know that like Yuwa has got the place in his heart. He doesn't have other women. I think it just makes us feel better about his connection to Yuwa. She's the only one for him.
Yeah, and I want to caution people and not think that neglected means unused. So because we've had this issue before. Or in the he's just neglecting them. He's not interested.
Well, he does. It does say that they've been sent. All have been sent untouched to his neglected harem or back home. So so that's good. All untouched. That's a good 2 words.
Yeah, and I get the sense.
Patty?
But also, what?
You keep freezing.
Am I freezing? Damn it. Sorry. I'm trying, guys. I'm trying. But I think you may be right, Mindy, that he's kind of like a one-woman sort of man. That's the impression that I get. And I don't think that I think also part of him is like, I don't necessarily deserve to have this company or this treatment. Like, I'm a warrior. This is what I do. I don't have time for emotions like this. Like someone else we know in another comic.
It shows that yeah. Sorry.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Minnie.
Oh, it also shows, I think, some kindness of him because he sends some of them back home. So yeah, some of them he keeps, okay, but some of them he sends back home, which is nice. I don't know if that was very common back then.
Yeah, probably not.
Sorry, Peg, you were saying.
Oh, I was just going to say that speaking of symmetry, this whole little flashback, or I guess it's not a flashback, it's an interlude down to Sean, reminds me, as far as storytelling, of the kiss in MPL.
Oh, yes.
Because it's perfectly symmetrical, just like the kiss. The kiss has these certain panels that come in, center is the kiss, and then the same number of panels coming out. This one is actually, I could talk about this later, but if you break down the rhythm of this episode, this is almost at the dead center of it. And you have 3 panels coming in, and then you have the central panel of when they first see each other in the flashback, and then the 3 panels coming out again. And then you're back up to, and then of course the fire and snow bring you back to the camp and to the gur and the tent. So it's the halfway point. It's that perfectly symmetrical structure. And then you go back to what we started with at the top of the episode, which is the flames against the snow, except this time the flames are inside the tent. It's perfect storytelling.
I love how,
it's built like a piece of music is what it is.
I love how like your perspective, like I would maybe unconsciously notice it, but I love how you can articulate it. And the fact that you said that it's like music, and I know you said you have a music background. It's so wonderful to see like your background and everyone's backgrounds complement and fully flesh out in the understanding of the story. It's such a delight. It really is.
I mean, this.
Yeah, I was looking forward to it too.
But this episode is just like Mount Everest of storytelling. It's perfect.
Yeah,
it really is.
One of the favorite things I learned when I was my first semester in college at an introduction to psychology class was the term Gestalt psychology, where Gestalt means the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And it was just an amazing, idea. And I think about that a lot whenever I collaborate with other people. And you just see that you cannot come up with the same things that you do in isolation that you do when you collaborate with other people.
Wait, darling, show me your sushi. I want to vicariously eat some of that sushi.
I'm already down to these few things.
Wait, is that one tamagoyaki, the yellow one? I'm like,
yes, it's tamago, and then just for salmon. This is unagi, so eel. And then this is like a salmon roll with more raw salmon in it with cream cheese and avocado. Jade's ears are really up right now.
Oh my God. I'm just stopping myself from licking this camera. That looks so good. So good. You guys don't understand. I'm like way out on the prairie. There's no eel anywhere around me for like 500 miles. And you probably don't want to eat that.
So Peg, when we go to LA, it'll be a gastronomical experience for you as well.
Oh, it's amazing out here. You get to eat anything.
Cool. So now we're back in the tent, and yes, we have this again, like you said, Peg, the juxtaposition of the snow and the fire, which is now contained, which I totally did not notice that the difference between contained and uncontained. And it's beautiful. It's like just these gorgeous lamps. Clearly he is the king and has nice stuff, even on this battlefield. And she says, I know nothing of it. The route was planned by our grand advisor, who'd also sent scouts before we last set off. Okay, so yeah, he knew what he was doing. And the bandits appeared from nowhere. And she's kind of hunched over, like I feel for her. She's defending herself, but at the same time, maybe a little frightened. And like hurt.
The hair says it all. It'll tell you what their feelings are.
Yeah, he still got her gripped by the wrist. Not that great.
Yeah, he hasn't let her go. And she's in a really compromised position here because this has taken a huge turn for her. And I think there's fear, but also resignation. And we'll see it in how she speaks later on. She tells him, like, you don't have to trust what I say. I don't expect you to. I know this looks suspicious. But if you know anything about my family, you know that the fourth princess of Yuwa is an adopted child. And so she's like, that in her eyes, like using her as a device, she's not worth anything politically.
Yeah, she's less valuable because she's not a real princess.
Yeah,
I just feel so bad when you hear her say that, because you just know that all these years she's been told, oh, you're adopted, you're not worth it, and she thinks of herself as less worthy because of that. Just kills you. And Ulaan, at that point,
of course, the tinfoiling person in me is like, she's adopted. Where's she from? Who are her parents? Where? So
we'll never know.
Why is adoption a common theme between these stories of this story
Ooh.
and MPL?
Good point. Good point.
It's always like there's a child that's less than because they're not blood related.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think
It's
both
just
of
a
them.
little interesting thing that's in both stories.
Yeah. Yeah.
So true.
And I think there's also a definite parallel between chosen families too,
Yes.
because we see that with Tora and Quincy. Even though he's kind of like forced into this family situation, he could choose not to be interacting with Quincy. But then we also see that Yuwa still has some fondness for her adoptive family and the family that she finds later on.
Yeah.
And here's
her.
the fourth touch coming up.
Sorry, what?
The fourth touch comes up now.
Yeah. Now here you can see he basically goes a complete shift in response to her words. The first panel, he still has those red glowing eyes, and he's still what's the word? His brows are still furrowed, but he's listening. He's receptive. And in the next panel, you see, like you said, he's holding her chin. He lifts it up and he tells her, "You are a royal princess, so never bow to anyone, not even to me, especially not to me." Just a complete reversal of his behavior 5 seconds ago. He's telling her to respect herself, and he's moved by how she feels about herself. He went from being angry at her and feeling betrayed to being moved by her self-doubt and her putting herself down.
Yeah. Well, and I think because he's the youngest son out of his family, if I remember correctly. So I think he identifies with that, and her honesty, again, this is a moment where her honesty disarms him.
Nicely put.
Yeah. He's telling her to respect herself, not to put herself down, which is validating. And his whole body has, he seems like he's slid off the chest and he's come down to greet her, to be close to her. And now he still has that one hand on her arm, but instead of gripping it aggressively and threateningly, now it's supportingly. But
then he lets her go physically and metaphysically.
He said it's release, and you see her eyes are like kind of feeling wounded, hurt, attentive, confused, a lot of emotions there. And he says, "It's too dangerous for you to be here now. You need to leave." He turns around.
Wait, here's the
Doesn't
second panel with the background taken out. So it intensifies the feelings and intensifies your response to it focuses you on him, and it has all those little backlit glows around him. So that's kind of like his internal. To me, anyways, it's like it symbolizes what's going on inside of him. Are those little glows? Maybe a snap or whatever. And his hair is calm again.
I was wondering if in that moment, it felt like this was Yuwa and that she's also the enemy. So he cares for her. She's the, did I get break up again?
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least for me.
Yeah. Of course it doesn't when I need to talk. Okay, so what I was saying before was that she's a duty to his family. Again. Okay, let me try a third time because I know it cut out on me again. So Yuwa is important to him. He cares about her. We know this. And at the same time, he has a duty to his people. And so in this moment, to me, this is his resignation of, this is what I have to do in order to protect them both. I have to let her go.
Reminds us of someone else we know, right?
Uh-huh.
And you see the dejection. He turns away. He's so sad. And you said his hair is limp, right? I feel like that's depression. He's depressed. And I feel like also the whiteness and the fact
Very
that there's
sad.
blurry spots in front of him and the light coming out, it feels like he's, you know, this is him already back out there in the snow, in the battle, in the light, just leaving the warmth and the comfort of the home and the tent to just go out there and do what he's always done and be alone and be lonely in the battlefield.
Yeah.
Him giving things up again for her safety. He said, I'll prepare guards and a carriage to take you back. Yeah, totally reminiscent of Fort Toro having to say goodbye to Puppy.
Yeah.
Saddest thing ever.
Well, and part of me wondered, like, does he think that he's going out to this battle to die?
Oh no, that's more parallel.
That felt like, I don't know, like the second time around that I read this, I was like, oh my God, is he think he's gonna die? Because he's got that resignation and just that defeat almost.
I don't know, to me, that's about the defeat in the relationship there, or defeat of the,
Okay.
the connection they're forming, just because he's still 𝗪𝗃 Inu, isn't he more or less really hard to beat? So, but then the next two panels where you see his feet, he stops walking, and then he's got the ... where those two panels are, to me, he's making that decision in a sense to betray his people. In other words, to reveal that information to her so she could use it to protect herself, but she could also use it in any way. You know, he has no control over it once it leaves his mouth. So he's putting that, she's kind of rolling the dice with her there. And he makes that decision with those two panels.
That's true.
I think he only cares about her safety, quite frankly. So she knows that information, and she's going to do whatever the hell she wants with that. If she wants to warn her father, or if she's going to make a run for it and hide somewhere. I don't know. But I think he sacrifices his own happiness for the well-being of his people. And it's just sad that he never has had like true happiness for himself.
Oh, yeah. He tells
Now
her,
I'm
he
very
says,
sad.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna get to unsad
Poor
quite
dude.
soon, right?
My favorite.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Sure. No, we haven't been thinking about this for like 2 months. This moment. So he says the northern attack will launch a full-on, the northern army will launch a full-on attack on all the eastern kingdoms when the next full moon rises. The kingdom of Shan is 5th on our list. Do with that information what you will. And again, he's not looking at her. And Yuwa is thinking over what he said, where you need to leave now, do with that information what you will. And she has this completely plaintive, kind of like begging look on her face, where you can see how emotionally impacted she is by what he's just said to her, and how she realizes what it meant. And she thinks, just like that, he'd allowed me to return home. Just like that, he'd revealed a critical state secret to me, the daughter of his enemy. And she can't just sit there and do nothing. And while his hair is flying away, again, well, Peg, right? The background's gone. She reaches out to him. You can continue. Sorry, I took away the visual moment. Sorry.
That's fine. This is the third one. This is her, her impulse, her intense emotion.
Yeah, the space between her hand and his hair killed me. I don't know why, but it just does.
And you can see the emotional metaphor, because in the actual panel above where he's like, do with that information what you will, his hair's going straight down. There's no wind in the, but it's the storytelling, like nobody questions. It's just perfect, you know, because suddenly it's their feelings flowing.
I see this panel like he's this wild stallion that you can't rein in, you know, and it's like this gorgeous hair flying everywhere, and then this poor girl trying so hard to keep him in his, you know, still, but you can't. He has to run free and do what he wants.
In that panel where she grabs him, she's kind of a wild little filly herself, though. Look at her.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, her robe is already
jumping
stripping
in.
down. She's willing to shed some layers to get to him and show her vulnerability and passion. Aw. Yeah, she grabs him around the waist. Gorgeous, just like gorgeous scene where she's, and they're gonna say this later, but she might have a hard time articulating it in words, but she feels very, very strongly in this moment. And so she's letting her actions show that.
Yeah.
And he turns around, he's in shock, and she just says Ulaan, and she sniffs. And she thinks to herself, at that moment, Lady narrates, all I could feel was a crushing sense of sadness and pain. And she just says Ulaan again, and she's crying. And this is from his perspective, looking down at her. I had so much to say to him, but all that came out was his name. So I repeated that name over and over again. Oh,
It's just like that saying. What's that saying? If you love something, let it go. And then if it leaves you, it was never yours. But if it like grabs your ass and starts crying, that it is yours. It's yours.
That's how it went, Patty.
There,
Yeah.
there it is. Boom. I love this scene so much.
If it grabs your ass, I'm gonna remember it that way, Peg. It really is. Oh God, it kills me.
Oh,
Just
she's
kills
crying.
me.
He goes and he brushes away her tears. And then we have
There it is.
the kiss. Ooh.
Okay, over to you,
Ah.
darling.
Yeah, go. You can describe it.
Boom. Look
So
behind you.
beautiful. It is a movement beyond it's like their hair is just flowing. It's almost like it's asymmetrical but balanced, kind of like yin and yang, and the fire is making it passionate, and it's just wild and passionate and great.
Yes.
You know this. Look at behind you at the what is it? The kiss, the wedding kiss, wedding day. You're painting.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
you know this panel more than anybody except Lily does. You broke it down.
It's
for
a
that.
beautiful panel.
Oh,
It's one of my favorites of all time.
clearly. I just
I
can't
just-
take my eyes off that.
I love how at this moment, they've been, human beings, like we have two parts, well, we have many parts, but we have the rational part and the emotional part. And all along, they've been using their rational part. They've been, Ulaan with, is she a ploy, is it not? Yuwa with trying to figure out what her future is going to be. And at this point, they've disregarded and discarded their rational part, and they've just let their emotions come through, because this is what they really feel for each other. They have a lot of reasons not to be with each other, but they want to be with each other. And this is the moment where they relinquish their rational brain telling them no, and they've just given into their passions, which says yes to the other person.
So can I point out one little thing though is, remember when the last one where there was little glow marks around him, even though the background was gone? If you look at where the first panel after she grabs him with no background, and then she says Ulaan, the first time she says Ulaan, the glow on the front of him, if following my theory of like the backgrounds reflect their inner landscape, that glow on him is his feelings for her kind of building. It's also the fire starting to come out of its container there. And then if you go the next one, she's crying Ulaan, there's still a little bit of glow there on his shirt. And then the next one, then it's a hand. But then on the kiss panel, the fire is now out. It's unleashed from those panels. Now the fire is all over the place. It's in her skirt. It's it's all around them, and they're all covered in the glow. So you could see the feelings build through that use of light in those panels.
Yeah.
And then they're like in the fire for the rest of it, of course.
Wow.
And I just want to point out, Yuwa and Poppy were both the ones to be like, hey, get over here.
Yep.
Like,
Parallels.
I love how you were pointing out that they just kind of let their logical brains go. They let go of the paranoia. And if you look at the scenes that build up to the first kiss in Midnight Poppyland to this one, there is a lot of like trust and turmoil issues of like, what's your motive? What's behind this? Can I trust you? Or, like to do with their plot and they throw all caution to the wind and just go for it. and I love that. And the background colors are similar because like we've got a sunset in the back of Midnight Poppyland, and then we've got the fire here. So I just I love the parallels between the two of them.
I mean, I always feel like his feelings are like a fire in him, and then it grows and grows and grows into this until it just overflows and sweeps him away.
Yeah.
And her too. I mean, she's the initiator, so.
Right.
And speaking of being swept away, we have a short description here, which we'll do for this, and then we'll delve into it more later. So we have that night, and you see a panel of them kissing. He's on top of her. Looks like she's lying down. I don't see any clothes. What words fail to convey, we expressed with our bodies instead. And then you have, I don't know.
My favorite panel.
Why he would be sweating, guys? Maybe it's just really hot in that tent.
Right.
I don't know.
I remember very distinctly, I was having a conversation with the girls, and I can't remember, I think it was Lola, and I was like, girl, no, that's his O face.
He's nutting.
But like it's a really tender moment too. But yeah, he's like the fangs. I'm sorry, y'all. Like y'all are gonna get intellectual analysis at this point. Like fangs.
I just have to add, I really like how he's like, Yuwa, and then while he's nutting, right? And Yuwa's like, what? Huh? Like, what type of conversation are you guys trying to have right now? But you know, it's a common thing between them. If y'all listeners look at SGs for ABs, the conversation is quite prevalent in these scenarios.
That must be another magical superhuman capability, because there is no talking typically during orgasm.
Oh yes, that's why he's sweating. Thank you. I didn't understand, Patty. They must be working out. Thank you. I understand now.
Yes. Oh my gosh. But yeah.
I mean, nutting is pretty self-explanatory. Nutting don't mean spreading peanut butter on white bread. Okay.
You're killing me, darling. I'm dying here.
And we end the episode with,
it's warm in here. It ain't just I have a southern face.
What? Huh?
Oh.
I did not hear what you said, so I don't know why they're laughing.
It's fine.
Something about the southern.
I think there's a laugh.
Talk amongst
about the
yourselves.
unfaith. It's fine. Oh Lord.
Well.
Oh man. But regardless,
we have a lot
this is
more of this stuff
moment,
to cover,
and I love it.
Yeah.
So just to end this episode off, he says, Yuwa, I'll find a way to keep you safe. Stay here with me, which to me is perfect. You know, they've done their workout, you know, their Pilates and after that Pilates session, they decided he just totally changed, and he decided he wants her, and he's ready to, his emotions and brain have kind of merged together, and he says, I don't care what obstacles are between us, I want you to be with me. So he's made his decision. Whew.
It's okay. Yeah. It's not Pilates, dear listeners. They're having sex. It's fine.
I would be a little concerned if anyone read this and didn't realize that was what was happening, but okay.
I think if they were like 14 and younger, they wouldn't know what's going on.
Maybe.
Oh, no.
I don't know.
Yeah. 14-year-olds, they know.
Yeah.
They know.
I was younger. So what do we have to say about this episode as a whole before we get to our special content? One of the husbands, by the way, in the Midnight Pipeline video, he was like, he called it special pictures. I think it was Elizabeth's husband. So before we get to our special pictures. Yeah.
Like, dude, it's okay. It's smut. It's fine. You can just be upfront about it.
So what do we have to say to talk about this episode as a whole?
It's definitely one of my favorite episodes for AB. I mean, that last panel, it's all worth it. Like, that's like the perfect ending, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's beautiful.
I mean, I think it has the biggest, I mean, it's got the AB
And it's raw.
kiss in there. It's got so much in here. It's got the biggest unanswered cliffhanger to me is the whole, what is this debt and the whole tension of it.
Mm-hmm.
I actually, this is like a math nerd thing, but I actually analyzed this panels. I analyzed the panels according to the backgrounds. And it has remember I said before it was symmetrical with the Sean thing at the middle, but it actually has a musical build to it, like a build of tension. So, so like the panel 1 is the war. Remember the fire in the snow? Then there's 2 panels in the tent. Then there's 1 panel going back to the memory of him holding the head. Then there's 4 panels in the tent. Then there's the panel of the flags, that monochrome, and then there's 5 panels in the tent. And then you have the dad with the Okuri Inu, 2 panels, and then the first panel where the background drops out. Then another 2 panels, then the map, and then the shot. So anyways, if you sketch that out, it builds a rhythm of like in the tent 2 panels, in the tent 4 panels, in the tent 5 panels. So it's really beautiful. And then the central piece of Sean, and then there's 22 panels afterwards that have the same rhythm of 1 panel of the monochrome, then 6 panels in the tent, and then the remembering, and then another 6 panels in the tent, and then 2 panels, the panels where they're with the backgrounds dropped out, and then another 6. So it's like flawlessly symmetrically, but with the building tension, building a visual tension and a pace to it. So when I broke that all down and I looked at it, so if you take the whole episode and you fold it in half, it's almost just lines right up. So that's one of the reasons why this is one of my favorite episodes and why it is so extra and so flawless. It's the structure of it, as well as all the visual pieces and characters and the use of those backgrounds in such a, I'll use the word again, such a musical way.
Wow. I would never have picked up on that without you pointing it out. I mean, I feel like I should try counting now that I have that in my brain, but I'm so appreciative of you for bringing that out.
But if anyone's trying to do comics, you could think about that. That's a good way to build tension, is to use that visual pacing of the visual elements.
Patty, do you have final thoughts on this episode?
The biggest things to me are you hearing me? No.
Yes.
Okay, just checking because it's breaking up on me. But it's visceral, it's emotional, like it makes you go from like, I don't know, like it's very, very much an emotional roller coaster. That's how I felt about it, and I loved it. It drew me in, and it still baffles me to this day. So I came in on the heels of AB being completed. So thankfully, I did not have to wait months in between for episodes. But like, I think it's really important. Like, if you look at the notes that Lily left on these, that this was a contest piece. She didn't have to complete it. She didn't have to go to these lengths. And I think the fact that she did, especially with this episode, it just
Patty, you cut out.
Yeah, you're stuck. You lost your sound.
Nope. Where did I cut out?
That she finished it for the contest.
Yeah.
Yeah, just like the fact that she didn't have to do this and that she really put her heart and soul into this, it just makes me love her work even more and love her even more. So I appreciate that so much, that the story means that much to her to complete.
Patty, come back.
In this way. Sorry.
Darn it.
Sorry, my internet keeps fucking up.
Can I say
So-
one more thing, Mindy?
Yeah.
The whole episode is basically a conversation in a tent, right? It's not like a whole
Yeah.
bunch of scenes, it's a conversation in a tent. But in that conversation in a tent, think of everything that gets in there. There's romance, there's quiet moments, there's a fight, there's history, there's family stuff, there's spiritual stuff, there's a whole freaking intrigue thriller right in the middle of it. There's like everything in this episode, every piece of, like, all the facets of the story kind of come together in this one scene in a tent. All of it, even the smut. It's epic. I love this episode.
Yeah. So speaking of smut, we're going to do stop recording here and head to our next section where we will analyze the not safe for work version of this scene. So let me stop recording.